This edition of whatever it is you're watching is brought to you by
Ridley Report, Ridley Report, something, 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 Ridley Report. Ridley Report, Ridley Report, something, 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 Ridley Report.
Tonight on Free Minds TV, we're going to be covering some inmates who were charged with felony escape for some unauthorized conjugal visits. Also, a 15-year-old girl who has been charged with a sex offense for taking pictures of herself. These are laws that really aren't being followed in the way they were meant to be followed. Also, the Downsizer Dispatch, a light travel season expected this Thanksgiving, and a whole lot more tonight on Free Minds TV.
And welcome to a brand new Thanksgiving's edition of Free Minds TV, where we challenge you, the viewer, to think outside the box. With you, as always, is Toby.
And Nick.
Lauren, our director, is still behind bars. I think she's going to be behind bars for another couple of weeks here. So thanks to Mike, who's behind the booth doing the entire back part of our show. So thanks a lot to him. So if there's a few mistakes here and there, it's okay. It's I think the first time he's actually directed this show. So a lot of help from people who are stepping up to the plate and helping us out while Lauren is behind bars. And of course, hopefully we'll be talking to her and getting her experience of what's going on there. And if you want to know why she's behind bars, well, check out last week's show where we covered it in depth at freemindstv.com, as well as all the other ways to help the show. Check out Free Minds Radio and everything else online at freemindstv.com. All right, we got a ton to talk about today, Nick, and I want to get into a couple of stories that I found about laws and the spirit of the laws.
And there are a couple somewhat racy articles, I guess.
Well, that's right. We were talking about some different ways that sometimes prosecutors, overzealous prosecutors, police out there go after people and charge them with crimes that when the laws were written, I don't think the people who wrote the laws ever expected the laws to be applied that way. This one coming out of Indiana, and it has to do with some inmates who were behind bars in a facility that housed both men and women, but kept them separate cells, separate parts of the jail that they were being kept in. But they found out a way that they could undo some of the fixtures in the ceiling and crawl through the ceiling and have relationships with each other in different parts of the cell. A lot of the time the women would sneak through the ceiling and hang out in the men's cell blocks, and sometimes the men would do the same thing, sneak over and have relations and have sex with the men who were in the men's block. So they're going back and forth, they're behind bars, passing the time. Some of the quotes from the inmates who were doing this say that that's exactly what they were doing, trying to pass the time. Well, clearly it's not something that a lot of people would approve of, mixing the people who are behind bars. After all, they're in jail, presumably because they did something wrong. A lot of the time it's not going to be true, but let's just go with presumably. They have been charged with felony escape charges. And when I read this, it just made me think, were they trying to escape? No, they weren't. They were trying to go to a different part of this prison. Now, is that escaping? And if you read the article, and if you want to check out the show content, it's up on our website at freemindstv.com. But if you read the article, it looks like they were pretty content not escaping. I mean, they made their own homemade booze. I think they call it hooch when you're in jail. They were playing cards and having sex. So, I mean, they didn't really want to leave. They were perfectly content. The article also talks about how there were a number of inmates involved in this, 6 of which are being charged, 3 men, 3 women. They also may be going after some other inmates who have already been released, or some who are still serving sentences, and charging them with escape charges, when clearly no one actually escaped from jail. And it's going to be you and I, the taxpayers, who are going to be paying to house these people behind bars for another 1 to, 7 years for a felony charge of this type. Is that something I want my tax dollars to go towards? These people were not trying to escape from prison. They were trying to get to another part of the prison. And it just doesn't seem to be going with the spirit of the law, the way the law was written and thought about when it was written, to put these people behind bars for more time for trying to escape from prison. So when people look at their record, and their record says they tried to escape from prison when they didn't.
Right, and most states do have some kind of a law against having relations while you're an inmate in a jail, But my guess is it's probably a lesser offense. So the prosecutor went with these felony escape charges because it sounds better. I mean, it looks better if the prosecutor gets a felony conviction and convicts escapees, even if that's not actually what they did, and it doesn't, what they're being charged with doesn't actually line up with what they did. So clearly I think it's a misapplication of that law, and if you wanted to charge them with something else, okay, but do you really need to slap another felony charge on them and either put them back in jail or keep them in jail? I don't know what good that's actually going to do for them or for society as a whole.
Yeah, I was reading the Guinness Book of World Records today, and you know, I think we've mentioned this many times on the show, America is #1 for housing people behind bars. We have over 2 million of them. 25% of the world's population of prisoners are here in America, and we're the freest country in the world. 1 in 100 American adults behind bars is because of prosecutors being awarded and promoted based on how many convictions they're not getting, not based on how correct the convictions are and who they're going after and putting real criminals behind bars. No, it's based on how many top-level felony convictions or misdemeanor convictions, how many convictions they're getting, and that doesn't even need to be taken to trial. A plea bargain works just as well for them. So one of the many reasons that our prisons are overflowing and the freest country in the world locks up more people than any other country. Now let's get into the next article that I stumbled across while I was perusing the internets. And this one comes from Ohio. Central Ohio authorities filed felony charges against a 15-year-old girl who has been accused of taking nude cell phone photos of herself. She is being charged with illegal use of a minor in nudity-oriented material and possession of a criminal tool. Is the criminal tool? A cell phone that she used to take the picture with. Now this 15-year-old girl, you know, definitely was messing up a little bit, probably trying to get attention in the wrong ways, taking nude pictures of herself. We've been seeing more and more cases of this popping up ever since you can start sending pictures to each other with cell phones. You know, technology these days.
Everybody has a camera with them at all times, basically.
It's ever growing. And this girl, to help her out in her path of life because she's gone astray, trying to get attention in the wrong way, at least some would argue, is going to be a sex offender, presumably for the rest of her life, unless the court changes their minds and decides that she's not going to have to register wherever she goes. But felony child porn charges against this girl, which makes her a sex offender for taking pictures of herself. Can you abuse yourself? Can you be charged with sexually abusing yourself?
Well, I mean, it seems like she'd be better off if she was charged as a juvenile with killing somebody, because that doesn't follow you around in the same way that a sex offense charge does. I mean, you're always going to be in the sex offender registry, and you're not going to be able to live within a certain distance of a school, certain other areas. A lot of jobs are not going to hire you, so it's actually, in terms of how it's going to follow you around with a record, you'd be better off to get drunk, run somebody over, and kill them, most likely, than to actually be a sex offender, because killing somebody you could probably get off your record more easily.
And so when the lawmakers were writing the laws and thinking about them being carried out by police and prosecutors across the United States, and particularly here in Ohio, were they thinking that these laws would be used against the very kids that are taking the pictures? So the kid takes the pictures. Was that what the law was written for? Is the application of this law going along with the spirit of the law? I'd have to say, if it is, this is not a free country. And I think that most people who are familiar with this program would know that we are slipping down the slippery slope of less and less freedom every day, which is bringing us to, be prisoners ourselves with the laws that we're writing, because the way that they're being applied, just not with the spirit of the law anymore.
No.
I mean, is this going to help this girl?
Well, it certainly won't. But
that's what the laws are supposed to do. These laws are supposed to be here to protect the children. These laws are supposed to be here to rehabilitate. Is this going to help her out and rehabilitate and be all better from whatever was troubling her to make her take the pictures in the first place?
Well, no, it won't. And a lot of these laws are written because it helps politicians get reelected. They get to look tough on crime, and the prosecutors carry them out to the letter. So they'll prosecute anybody they think they can under these laws. And that's one of the reasons why the U.S. incarcerates far more people than communist China, even though we have a fraction of the population. And that, if you really think about what that means, everyone will call China a police state or a dictatorship. is our democracy really that much more desirable when we incarcerate a much higher percentage of our population?
And not only percentage of the population, numbers-wise, too. 1.5 million people incarcerated in China. We're at 2.2 million. They have 1.5 billion people. We have, what, 300 million?
Right.
That's disgusting, and we call ourselves the freest country. You know, this article makes me wonder if you can be charged with, a kid can be charged with taking child porn of themselves, taking the picture of themselves. Could they also be charged with statutory rape? Can you rape yourself?
I don't know.
But an overzealous prosecutor might think you could.
Yeah, I mean, I know there have been prosecutors who've tried to prosecute parents for naked baby photos, I mean, of their child when they were 6 months old or a year. Clearly, that's not porn that's being produced for anybody's, for distribution as some kind of a sexual thing. It's just a picture of your child. And they've gone so overboard trying to protect children that they're willing to prosecute parents and the children themselves for no reason, no good reason. I mean, it's not really child porn, but they're following the letter of the law, and the way they wrote it was very broadly. Right. Because they felt that would protect children the best, but so is it really?
In this case, the very people that this law was supposed to protect, the children, is going after and hurting them. So I think that has a lot to say about all of our laws. A lot of the time they hurt people more than anything else. And if you don't care about that, it really hurts the taxpayer right. a lot as well. I mean, if you don't care about the actual people who are behind bars, what about your wallet? What about paying to keep these dangerous people behind bars? This dangerous girl who took a photo of herself, or these dangerous prisoners who were escaping to another part of the prison. You know, I know that I don't want to spend my money on housing them behind bars and putting them in a cage. It's just not worth it to me. Even if I agreed that these things are wrong, I'm not going to weigh in on my opinion of the things that they're doing. I just don't want to spend my money on it. I mean, give me a break.
Right, and they could at least just clarify the laws. I mean, personally, people who are charged with crimes like murder or rape, if they're in prison, I think it should be illegal for them to break out. Child porn, yes, I think it should be illegal, but they can rewrite the laws so that it's more clear, and they're not going to be catching people in this dragnet who were never intended to be caught in the first place. And it's sad that they have to do that anyway, because you think if there was a decent human being who was a prosecutor, they would follow the spirit of the law and not try to ruin people's lives for their own career. But sadly, that's what they do. And there are, I'm sure there are some nice prosecutors out there. There's a lot of guys who are jerks, and they don't care about anybody but themselves, too, just like anybody else.
And the system is unfortunately set up to make prosecutors go in the direction of just prosecuting anyone to get a conviction. But, that is America. Speaking of laws, though, they're always trying to craft new ones in Washington, and Downsizer DC is an organization that helps you get in touch with your lawmakers in Washington and at least tell them how you feel about what the laws that they're passing. Nick, what's this week's Downsizer Dispatch?
Well, this week's Downsizer Dispatch has to do with the auto industry bailout. And as many of the viewers know, the auto industry is trying to get $25 billion in bridge loans or aid, and specifically for the domestic automakers, GM, Chrysler, Ford. For some reason, foreign auto is not included, even though Toyota and other foreign companies, Honda, have plants in the U.S. and employ Americans to produce these cars, and Americans drive the cars. But apparently, if it has a Japanese name on it, they're not going to bail them out. So they're asking for $25 billion in taxpayer money that is going to come out of the TARP, which is the $700 billion that Congress appropriated to bail out the financial sector, not the automakers, but it's Washington, so whoever has the best lobbyists is going to get a piece of the pie. Now, Downsizer DC is trying to reduce the size of the federal government, and clearly that makes them opposed to this bailout, like many American taxpayers. So what should we do to try to keep the U.S. auto industry afloat? Most people don't want to see these companies go under because it would be bad for the economy, not just auto workers, but many people who are employed in industries that are dependent on the U.S. auto industry. Well, we could start with corporate taxes. The U.S. has the second highest corporate tax rate in the world, which means we're not very competitive. That's one reason why these other jobs are going overseas, along with many other corporate jobs. It's simply cheaper for companies to operate in another country with lower corporate taxes. We supposedly have a free market, but if you actually look at the facts, we're a lot more regulated than most people think. U.S. businesses spend $148 billion in 2005 complying with the complicated corporate tax code. That's just their compliance costs. That's not actually paying the taxes. That's money for accountants and filing the paperwork. You have to employ thousands of people at a large company to keep track of all the dollars and cents and try to pay as few taxes as legally possible. And some companies, like we said, they're spending that money that could be spent on their own financial security, on creating new products that would help them stay competitive. They're spending that on compliance and on the corporate taxes. And by cutting corporate taxes, we could pump about $500 billion back into our economy. Now, some people don't want to benefit the big corporations, but if taxpayers are bailing them out, maybe we should just cut the taxes rather than giving the money to Uncle Sam and then handing it back. It'd be a lot more efficient just to have them not pay. And it'd be much more significant. You could help U.S. corporations, including the automakers, and you'd help them stay competitive. $500 billion a year, well, that's a heck of a lot more than the $25 billion that's been proposed. So if you think that's a good idea, go to downsizedc.org, and you can get on their email list, and you can contact your representatives with an automated form. The only caveat here is, of course, Downsize DC would want to see the federal government cut spending by $500 billion. One of the main reasons we're in this financial crisis is that Americans and the U.S. government have wanted to spend money and pay for it later. And that debt is what's killing us right now. So if we're going to cut taxes, which I think we should, we're going to have to cut spending too.
You know, Nick, this brings up a point that I was talking to some people at work about. And, you know, it's sad to think about, but I think it might be true. I think a lot of the American people out there really don't know where the government gets its money. I think they might honestly be confused about it. A lot of people think of these handouts and stimulus packages as dad who has plenty of money, or you know, they're looking towards the government for a handout when where's the government get its money?
Well, it gets its money from you.
Right.
So when the government prints out more money, like the Federal Reserve just did this week, $800 billion more dollars that they're going to pump into the system, that's money that they're going to print. And they've gotten to the point where they're openly admitting they don't have any more money. They're printing this new money. That's going to be paid for by you. That makes your dollars worth less.
It doesn't mean you need to be rich in a high tax bracket, no matter who you are. The dollars in your wallet will be worth less. And you don't need to be real rich to have that happen. No matter how rich you are, the dollars will be worth less. So if you're one of these poorer person out there saying, well, tax the rich, have them give me a handout. No, when you're printing money, everybody's equally hurt by it. And all dollars are devalued and worth less.
And the reason politicians go to the printing press is it's a lot easier to do than raising taxes. If you were to go to middle-class Americans right now when they're strapped for cash and say, we're going to raise your taxes by 15 or 20%, they say absolutely not. They would kick any politicians who pass that tax increase out of office. But it's much easier to just print that money, add it onto the national debt, and the American people will pay back that $800 billion plus interest. Right. So you're actually, not that I'm a fan of taxes, but if you're going to raise a certain amount of money, you're better off paying it up front in terms of taxes than paying it with interest.
Right, but the government's doing the complete opposite, and they're saying, well, pay it with interest, we'll just print the money, and you know what? To make you feel better about it, here's a little stimulus package. Right. Here's $500, go spend it. When really you might as well just take a credit card out and, you know, charge stuff on that, because you're going to be paying it back as a taxpayer eventually. So, you know, these stimuluses, they might sound real good, but we do have to pay them back.
Right, it's your money.
Right.
I mean, you're borrowing against your own future taxes. When the debt balloons, which it already has, we're up to $11 trillion in debt, and these liabilities.
Last month it was 10. What happened? Oh yeah, bailouts.
Right. Well, these bailouts are adding up. The total possible liabilities are totaling up to over $7 trillion now, and those were some of the charts we were showing earlier.
Yeah, and so you know, whatever you do, check it out, downsizedc.org, a way to get involved. All right, when we come back, we have a couple more articles. We want to talk about holiday traveling. How were your travels this Thanksgiving season, and a whole lot more. Stay tuned. This is Free Minds TV.
Free Minds TV is brought to you in part by Life Productions for your basic and semi-pro video production needs. From full wedding and event coverage to DVD authoring and distributions, lifeproductions.com, that's lyfproductions.com.
Free Minds TV is brought to you by freekeen.com. FreeKeen.com features audio, video, and blogs chronicling the transition to a voluntary society. FreeKeen.com also has comments and discussion forums so you can be heard. FreeKeen.com.
Well, thank you, Spencer.
This is Mark Edge from Free Talk Live, and you're watching Free Minds TV.
And welcome back to Free Minds TV, where we challenge you, the viewer, to think outside the box. With you, as always, is Toby.
And Nick.
All right, it is the holiday season. Thanksgiving is upon us, and when you're watching this premieres actually the day after Thanksgiving. We're recording it the day before. But Nick, you have an article that's predicting how some of the traveling's going, so I guess as you're watching this, you can critique whether that was your experience or not. So Nick, what are they predicting for the holidays to travel, and how are things going thus far today, the day before Thanksgiving, really the travel day? Of course, people going out all over the country to be with friends and family members. What are the experts saying?
Well, AAA always releases their statistics, what they're expecting for a travel season. And even though gas prices are down, things are going to be a lot lighter this year as far as travelers. AAA is saying that 41 million Americans are expected to travel this year, expected to travel over 50 miles from their home. And that's down about 1.5%, or 600,000 people. That's for driving. Now, for flying, it's expected to be down a lot more sharply, down 7%. And they didn't give a number for that. So it's down significantly, and the preliminary reports for the early travelers who've been leaving today and on Tuesday have been that it's been pretty light. I mean, unexpected. Some people were remarking that at some airports it's like a weekday afternoon rather than a holiday rush. So apparently, I mean, for those of you who are traveling, that might actually be good news. What it signals isn't necessarily good news. People obviously are still concerned about the economy, and really what it comes down to is, do you want to spend $400 driving 1,000 miles to visit your family? You know, that might be something you want to do, but is that a priority for you, or would you rather save that $400 or not charge it to your credit card and feel a little bit more secure coming down the road? So it seems like people are cutting back, and that's probably a good thing. I mean, that's what people need to do.
You know, I mean, I guess it's a bad sign for the economy, but if people are actually saving money or not, or actually at least living within their means, that's a good thing, not a bad thing. I mean, having a country where people aren't based on credit and whether they can afford things based on the old credit card, it's just not sustainable or a healthy way of living. So if people are actually living within their means, it could be a good thing, but it also could be a sign that things are doing poorly. I know I've talked to quite a few people who have been laid off right around this season, so that could have something to do with it as well.
Yeah, I know. Last I checked, Rhode Island was making out the worst, and northern New England, New Hampshire, Vermont. I'm not sure about Maine for our viewers there, but I know New Hampshire and Vermont are still doing well. Last I checked, New Hampshire was still adding jobs, more slowly, but we were one of the few states that was still growing. So northern New England is making out okay. Of course, we didn't have the big boom that some places did that was kind of based on real estate, but spilled over. Yeah, the bubble wasn't as big here, so we don't have as much to lose. But Rhode Island, last I checked, over 9% unemployment. I mean, that's 1 in 10 people out of work who would like to be working. That's probably because they offer a lot better compensation on unemployment in Rhode Island. I don't know, but I think that probably has something to do with it. So economy sort of souring. People are still getting by, but this is what needs to happen. I mean, people need to cut back, and it's going to be painful, but that's the only healthy way to get out of this. We can't just keep charging it.
It's also Black Friday here, where all the stores are kicking off their holiday retail season. I mean, actually, I've been in the stores. I think they were kicking it off right around when Halloween started, at least with the decorations. But there's some huge sales to be had. So I know that some people will make out. The retailers, they're not looking so pleased, though. A lot of huge sales to try to entice shoppers to come into the stores, which, you know, I like. I mean, it's nice to have big old sales out there, but a lot of people are saying that they're buying more of the necessities than junk toys they don't need.
I've heard a lot of people saying they're buying clothing for their kids or friends because you're going to need clothing, and they're buying food, which, you know, there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, I think the commercialism was a little bit overdone. I mean, it's nice to give somebody a gift, but if you can't afford it, don't feel too bad about it. Just send them a card. Let them know you're thinking about them. Send them a can of yams or something they can eat. I mean, things aren't quite that bad yet.
I don't know about yams, Nick. I don't want any yams in my Christmas stocking, but maybe you do. I'll get you some yams for Christmas.
I like them.
All right, yams it is. Check you off my Christmas list.
Well, moving on from the economy, we just came out of an election here. A lot of people are still kind of in a honeymoon period with the soon-to-be Obama administration. Some other people not so thrilled about it, and those would be gun owners. Now, we've talked about this on the radio side a little bit, but this is actually from the BBC. They're reporting that gun sales are way up, especially on so-called assault rifles, which tend to be military-style rifles, although they're civilianized for the American market. And in some areas, those types of weapons their sales are up by 50%. So people stocking up on that, they're not sure what kind of legislation is going to come out. Thankfully, we did have the Heller versus D.C. ruling, which did say that the Second Amendment is in fact an individual right. So to some extent, even with an Obama administration and a U.S. House and Senate that are probably not going to be very friendly to gun rights, probably not going to be too much they can do about it. They're going to be limited. They might crack down on assault rifles. They might try to introduce more regulations on handguns or certain types of ammunition. Who knows? But they're going to be somewhat limited, I think, by the court ruling. So that's good news, but still an area for concern. One of the few areas where we've seen constitutional rights actually restored to some extent has been the Second Amendment. So,
well, if we're bringing this back to the economy, gun dealers are having a field day right now. They say that the sales are up more than they have been since Clinton got elected into office. So way back, like 10 years ago, 12 years ago, way back then. So gun sales it's good for gun dealers and the economy in some senses, Nick. So let's not be all pessimistic about this.
That's true. I guess the gun dealers aren't going to be running to anyone for a bailout. I guess they miss out on the free money, though, in that respect.
It's not really free, Nick.
No, well, it's for the companies that are taking it, it's pretty close to free. Right. But yeah, I don't know what the Obama administration is going to do. He said he's not going to try to take people's guns away, although is he going to try to regulate them very strictly? He might. But I think that's not going to be a top priority for the Obama administration. Still, if you have the money and you're a gun, not a gun nut, but you're a gun enthusiast, stock up.
Well,
It can't hurt.
besides little junk guns, aren't they usually a pretty sound investment, or at least they hold their value pretty well? At least a nice firearm will hold its value throughout the years. So, I mean, chances are you're not going to lose money on it.
It's actually not a bad place to put your money. If you keep it in good shape, certain guns will appreciate, and it's certainly not like a car where you shoot it a few times and it's worth half of what you paid for it. It's a stable investment. It'll probably keep pace with inflation. I mean, it's a commodity.
Kind of like gold or silver. Think of it that way.
Yeah, and if they pass new gun regulations, suddenly it can be worth a whole lot more.
You got something that's worth a lot on the black market.
Well, on the legitimate market, last time they banned.
Are they grandfathered in?
They were grandfathered in, so people who had, say, a magazine over 10 rounds capacity, suddenly it was worth a lot more because you couldn't make any new ones.
Well, we are out of time, but we'd love to hear your opinion on everything we've talked about. Our email is back up and running. fmtv@freemindstv.com is the email. And Nick and I now both have our own emails as well. So you can email nick@freemindstv.com or toby@freemindstv.com to get in touch with either of us. Log on to our website, freemindstv.com. Ways to help the show, get all the archives of the show, as well as Free Minds Radio up there. We will be live this Sunday from 3 to 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time at freemindstv.com. It's been Toby here with you.
And Nick, and I hope you had a good Thanksgiving.
And safe travels if you are doing some traveling. Anyway, so...
This edition of whatever it is you're watching is brought to you by
Ridley Report, Ridley Report, something, 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 Ridley Report.